How we doing? Come-
Good to see you both.
Check. Oh, there we go. All right. I was actually hoping to do this just by voice, but for benefit of the folks who are watching on the web stream, I need to be on a microphone. And as we go around for the question and answer session later, I know that you'll want to just scream the question out, but if you could let somebody get to you with a microphone for the benefit of the folks that are watching at home, I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody, and to our alumni, welcome back. My name's Steve Pete. I'm the Director of Athletics at Maine Maritime. This is my 12th year at Maine Maritime. I love this place. I want to give you a little bit of my background. I am the youngest of 6 between my stepbrothers, myself. I'm the first with a college degree. I didn't think that was something that was attainable in my life. It wasn't something I ever gave a thought to until my football coach started introducing me to football coaches. I went on to Western Maryland College. I played 4 years of football at Western Maryland. I had some couple great years there. We went 30-0 my last 3 years. I immediately started working there in the athletics office and have been involved in Division III athletics ever since. I know what football means to all of you, and I know what it would mean to me if I was sitting at my alma mater on homecoming today thinking about my football program being suspended. So I need you all to understand that I love football. It's part of my life going back to 6 years old, and as a professional, it's been a part of my life for every year right up until 2020. So I do have a little bit of a football-shaped void in my heart, just like all of you. And today we're going to talk about a potential path back to football with all of you. So that's who I am. I'd like to introduce President Paul. Give a quick introduction.
Thank you, Coach. Am I broadcasting? Thank you, Coach. I'm Jerry Paul, President of Maine Maritime Academy, only for about 120 days. I think I've met most of you in the room. This is the first opportunity. Welcome back to homecoming. And yeah, as to football, when I became president, I heard quite a bit about the process of having to make a decision about its temporary status. And of course, I had a football committee. And so we met again. I got briefed up on that, read a report or some study and some analysis of the pros and cons of football. One of the things that I had heard from many of my fellow alumni was that they felt as though maybe they didn't have all the information from the past and wanted to know what the opportunities were for the future. And so with homecoming, we thought it would be a good idea to hold what we've called a football summit so that we can hear from the coach who was here what kind of colored the decisions to the current status quo and what could be a scenario going forward. One of the things that colors my view of this is the budget, the finances of it. We are currently running a deficit. It's actually the largest deficit we've ever had at our alma mater. I'm very sensitive to that. So I started off by saying, aside from all of the intangible pros and cons of a new or restarted athletic program, I have to first balance these books and look at the fiscal responsibility aspect of it and protect this institution. In that context, I did go to the coach and I said, Coach, could you develop a hypothetical scenario? What would a return to football look like? A timeline, a resource load, a cost load, and he developed that hypothetical scenario. I then took that scenario and sent it to our enrollment and admissions experts, asked them to say that under this scenario, what would be the likely impact on enrollment, which is the revenue model. And here with us today is Kim Riley, our Vice President for Enrollment Management and Admissions, and she would be available to ask questions about that. And then I took those projections and sent them to our Chief Financial Officer and our Vice President of Financial Services, and I said, okay, based upon that scenario and this enrollment projection, what do the books look like for a program sustaining itself? And so we've worked through that, and I think Coach Pete is going to walk through that a little bit in a slide show. I haven't taken a strong position one way or the other on this. I do recognize, as the coach said, the value proposition of bringing football back, but my first responsibility has to be to the institution and the sustainability, and that means the fiscal soundness of any projection going forward. And so hopefully we'll get more information shared and have a common understanding of where we're at and what the options are going forward and what that might mean for opportunities for all of us to participate in a potential decision as we move forward together. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time Monday morning quarterbacking an institutional decision that was made. August 14, 2020 was probably the most difficult professional day of my life. I had to speak with 40 young men, 43 to be exact, to let them know that this program was going to be put on indefinite suspension. Dr. Brennan at the time noted that football itself was the most expensive non-academic program at the academy. We were in a pretty precarious position going into this pandemic. There was a potential callback of state funding looming. We needed to recover some funds, and that's the play that he called. We executed that play. In the meantime, he had also requested that we undergo a full fiscal analysis of the program in the context of operating football at Maine Maritime. To that end, we brought in Maureen Devlin, and Maureen Devlin is a preeminent thinker in higher ed. She's on the MIT Futures of Higher Education think tank, and she is involved in a number of different ways in athletics, including the former chair of the Knight Commission. She didn't make any recommendations. It was literally just a framework for us to give to the Future of Football Committee to look through to see that we're all talking from the same sheet of music as it relates to the finances of the program. So a couple of challenges. When I took over in 2011, I did what any manager would do, and I started peeling apart every aspect of the operation. And one of the first things I did was dive into the budget. I looked back through football's budget, and I noticed that we were growing at a 7.5% rate each year. The budget was only increasing by 2% each year. I'm not a great math student, was not a great math student, but I knew that wasn't sustainable. That 2% in 2015 went flat. We stopped getting increases from year to year. So that was a challenge that we were facing at the time. Since that time, the budget has actually gone backwards. So during the course of the pandemic, when the football program was put on suspension, that money didn't go anywhere, it was vaporized. It was absorbed back into the institutional deficit. We then had additional cuts inside of the department. So we lost, at that point, 10% 2 different times over the course of the first year of the pandemic. So that's a little bit of our challenge at the moment. We are in, as President Paul noted, we're in the largest institutional deficit that we've ever faced, and we're now talking about trying to restart the engine on a pretty big ship here. Indefinite suspension means exactly that. It's a euphemism that's been used in the past for programs that are basically being taken offline. I have 100% treated this indefinite suspension as an indefinite suspension from day one. Football's still on our website. We just relaunched the website this year. There was never conversation about whether or not football would come off of the website. Locker room looks today exactly as it did on August 14, 2020. I have 2 offices that are sitting wide open, prime real estate in my building. I have had no less than 6 coaches ask me if they can move into those offices. I said, as soon as the academy makes a decision on football, I'll make a decision on what we do with those offices. I'm holding them for football. I haven't sold a single piece of equipment. I gave a couple of seniors their jerseys. We have every piece of field equipment, every helmet, every set of shoulder pads, all of the uniforms. Everything that we need for football is here. It's basically freeze-dried. It needs water. It's a turnkey operation. Never stopped working at any point on football over the last 2 years. I played football. I've been an administrator in Division III for 20-some years now. I know a lot of people. I've talked with a ton of coaches. I've talked with a ton of administrators. I regularly speak with Mike Kelly at Mass Maritime, and the first thing that we talk about every time we talk is, when are we getting the Admirals Cup going again? Mickey Raring, who I long coveted for the position here, is the head coach down at Maritime in New York. I'm in contact with him all the time, talking about what can we do to get this thing started. Help me out from your perspective as a coach at a maritime institution. I've been in contact with every conference commissioner in New England with football programs, constantly stoking the coals to let them know that Maine Maritime is still looking at the possibility of coming back to this game. We have an opportunity. We now have an opportunity because of some of that work. Tuesday of this week, one of the 3 conferences in New England that plays football extended an offer for us to begin playing in their league in the year 2025. They're in the process. They're drafting 2 different schedules. One includes Maine Maritime, one excludes Maine Maritime. President Paul mentioned that he had asked me to build out a timeline. My timeline started with football being varsity for the first year in 2025 to allow us time to build the program back up. So that matches up with what we're trying to do. To get it done, I need to be able to get to the AFCA convention in San Antonio, which is right before the NCAA convention. I need to be able to name a head coach by February 1st, 2023. We need to start recruiting immediately. We need to get the staff all the way back up so that we can begin recruiting effectively to bring a partial class in when May rolls around. August 2023, we have the potential to begin our first year of practices and play basically a sub-varsity schedule against schools inside of the state of Maine. Another year of recruiting, another year of sub-varsity football in 2024. And when we get that number back up, we can start looking at 2025 as our first year back playing varsity football at Maine Maritime Academy. The average Division III football program is about 103 right now on a roster. For a maritime institution, I feel like we can live with an 80. To get to 80, I need to have 95 in August because of attrition. We know that between 2017 and 2020, we had 25 students come in every year or more, at a minimum, 25 or more come in every year. The program was only maintaining a roster at about 40 to 50. That attrition rate is far too high. I think new leadership will give us an opportunity to make that number better. We've lost students. I have no doubt that we've lost students as a result of not having a football program. I said the other day, Maine, UMaine, USM, and Maine Maritime are the 3 places you can get an engineering degree in the state of Maine. Maine Maritime is the only one where you could get an engineering degree and play football. I think we've lost some folks that we would have otherwise had here. Since President Paul's been here, the refrain has been pretty loud and clear. We need to drive the number inside of the regiment up. The regiment was pretty popular amongst football players. I heard the expression MET for life recently. MET was where we were finding an awful lot of football players. And we see a corresponding drop in the yield over the last 3 years since we've had the program on suspension, 2 years, excuse me. Football is our biggest driver of diversity here at the Academy. 12% of the students here on the football program were people of color. It's a big driver for us. It's also a great spot to get out-of-state students. Our split was about 50-50 inside of the program. Here's a quick look at the most popular majors. So again, if we're trying to drive those regimental numbers, we have great opportunity here. So there's still some challenges. This year is the first year that Class A in Maine is playing out of state. There are only 8 teams left in the state of Maine in Class A. 8-man football has gone from 10 to 25 teams in the state. This year, Bucksport jumped over to 8-man. There are precisely zero 11-man football teams left in Hancock County. Since the pandemic, we've lost 1.3 million students going to college, just not taking advantage of the opportunity to go for whatever reason. And if you talk to anybody that works in higher ed right now, 2025 is a date that's looming large. At that point, they call it the enrollment cliff, 15%, roughly 4 million students less going to college. So I said there's an opportunity. I said that we have an invitation. For us to do this, we need to do this now. Total costs to start the program back up at this point are $750,000 for the first 3 years. $750,000. Timeline that's up there reflects the timeline that I laid out earlier in the presentation. At the end of the day, by December 31, we need to have 75% of that, $562,500 in hand to get ourselves going back on track. That's the number that we have to get to. That's the number that I need to get to by 12/31 so I can accept or reject the invitation, accept the invitation to the conference that has extended an opportunity for Maine Maritime to come back to football and play football with its membership. President Paul?
Thank you, Coach. I think that lays it out fairly well. As I said earlier, I have to first and foremost make this a matter of fiscal responsibility and the sustainability of the institution. It's been said 3 times now that we're running a deficit. No funds are budgeted in the FY23 budget that was here. So there is no money in the current budget, so you could not meet that timeline with our current budgeted funds. The good news is that when you look at the enrollment projections and extend them out the way that the coach mentioned, numbers calculated by Ms. Riley, it does look as though it would be reasonable to presume that over a period of time, the revenue from the enrollment increase would cover the cost of football. At the time that football was suspended, it was about 20% of the athletics department budget, which is the most expensive sport, but it was also 25% of its enrollment. So it was netting even at that time. And even at these numbers, if you get to a higher roster level than what it was before, I think it would net even more. The problem is that even that is based upon projections, and projections are predictions, and predictions you can't take to the bank. And so it would, in my view, not be wise to just move forward into this with the uncertainties unless you have closed some of that risk by having money up front. Right now, I don't have that money. That's the bottom line. So certainly want to open it up to any questions. No decisions have been made. What I've tried to do is just drive this to more objective criteria so that we can make decisions based upon the data and a risk assessment here. Yes, sir.
Is our situation
Hold on one second.
similar to the other maritime academies?
I'm going to give you all a microphone to ask the questions once again, so the people that are listening back home can hear that, if you don't mind.
Hi, Bob Tasker, class of 1967. Is our situation similar to the other maritime academies, and what are they doing to, as they move forward?
Well, the obvious distinction is restarting a program as opposed to maintaining a program. The other academies, our competitors, have an existing program with enrollment revenue that has continued to support it, and they were able to adjust their budgets accordingly. They were also able to adjust their enrollment management strategy to generate more revenue. I mean, it's a multi-part equation, a strategic enrollment management plan, and so it's hard to draw any analogies with them. They are also larger than us as well. I think one of the, I don't know how much it came through in Coach Pede's presentation, but as I understand it, our coach from the previous program kept the roster fairly low relative to other teams. What Coach Pete has suggested is that the roster should be higher. That should generate more revenue. Those other colleges that you're talking about are keeping their rosters at a high enough level, and they're more fiscally sustainable. As I said, even at that lower roster, football was netting here. It wasn't netting by very much. You go to that higher roster, over a period of years, it looks like it would net even with some safety factor. Speaking of safety, one of the other concerns or factors that you had to build into this is safety itself. Probably everybody in this room has played some football, including me, and certainly probably all football fans, and have watched the trends over time, but increasing attention and focus on concussions and the safety aspects of football. If we go forward with this, we had to make that a high priority for us. Along with the recruiting and having good quality people who are good leaders and maintain a good culture within the team, all comes down to the quality of the head coach that you seek. There'd be a heavy burden on Coach Pete and this entire institution to make sure that if we went down this path, that we are seeking a quality coach who has safety of these students in mind, the spirit to win, of course, but also the dedication of time necessary for recruiting to keep those enrollments levels up, but also recruiting to have a high caliber of talented athletes to go win some games. So a big burden would be on getting the right person. I might even hand the ball off here for a moment to the coach to talk a little bit about that concept of the role that the caliber of that coach would play in trying to restart a program.
Yeah, before I get into that, one thing I do want to add to this conversation is state funding levels are significantly different at Mass Maritime and SUNY Maritime. I believe it's 56 and 49% at those institutions versus maybe 19 to 20% here at Maine Maritime. So yeah, that support from the state certainly benefits those schools in keeping all their programs going through tough times. As it relates to leadership of the program, I'm going to say this. I think the last year was measurably one of the most successful years at Maine Maritime in terms of athletics. It was the first time in school history we won 4 team championships in a single year. We had, for the 12th consecutive semester, student athletes with a 3.0 term and cumulative grade point average. That comes down to the culture that's being created inside of the department, and that comes down to quality of coaches and how they run their programs. Football, leading up to the pandemic, was in a little bit of a different boat, I think, than the rest of the department. We were all kind of marching one way, and football was still marching in its own. So for me, anytime that you have an issue inside of a program, the person that we're looking at is the head coach. So in order to create a program that thrives, we need a coach who understands a couple of different things beyond just X's and O's. And some of that includes alumni outreach. I feel like we were falling down pretty badly in that regard. I felt like we were talking primarily only to our own alumni as opposed to all of the football alumni. That excludes an awful lot of people. So I want to make sure that this coach understands that they need to be inclusive, not only of alumni, but also the rest of the department. So football was kind of cloistered away up in the upper corner of our building and not necessarily a part of what the rest of us were doing. So for them to be a part of our department, we need them to be a good team player, not only with our alumni, but also with other folks on staff. And then really just buying into the things that we've been putting into place that have led to our success, not only in the classroom, but also on the field. And so really for me, anytime I'm looking for a head coach, I'm looking for fit for Maine Maritime. I'm looking for people who understand what it is that we're trying to do with our athletic program here, which is to educate folks, to take advantage of those inherent life lessons that are available to them inside of that athletic context. And I'm not sure that was happening in the past, but I will make sure that that's happening going forward.
I realize we got a little off topic from the question about the other schools, but I wanted to add in those other factors. Hope you don't mind. Yes, sir.
Kurt Nearing, class of 71. Just a comment first and then a question. One of the things I found, I've been on campus this morning talking to some of the students and some of the alumni, there does not seem to be the same cohesiveness that there was in the student body back in the days when we were all in the same regiment. I think that bringing the football program back into play would bring that cohesiveness or help bring that cohesiveness back to the student body, especially where you're talking about you're getting a lot of your diversity in students in from the football program by having the non-regiment and the regimental football players would create a nucleus for a cohesive unit in the student body. My question is, we just went out with a new fund drive, $65 million over a period of time. Would part of that money be used for football, or would we be looking for an independent fund drive to raise money for football? I have a feeling that there's going to come down to some funds from the Alumni Association to do this.
Yeah, there's nothing built into an existing capital campaign for football. There just isn't. Most of the capital campaign as it is currently structured is around capital improvement projects. Some of those are within athletics, but nothing for operational expenses of an athletic program. To your point about cohesiveness, a version of that I have heard and is somewhat persuasive to me is that with all sports, there is a certain, almost an identity, not completely, but a general genre of types of persons who tend to migrate towards different sports. And in the absence of football, I do have some concerns that there is a segment of those young high school graduates who are athletes who are and see themselves as football players, and we are no longer diverse enough to provide that offering in our sports portfolio. Since I was here and since all of us were here, the sports portfolio has been expanded quite a bit, and that's been encouraging to see. And they've had extraordinary success in most all of those programs, more so than when we were here. But as to that high school student who wants to go to college, maybe major in engineering, as the coach said, or any other major, and wants to play football, we're no longer, quite frankly, an attractive option for them. And I worry that particularly as to Maine students, that there is a demographic of those young high school students that we're not offering the opportunity of Maine Maritime Academy to anymore, and that troubles me a bit. I want this thing that we all know changes a person's life to be offered and available to the widest, most diverse host of young men and women who could come here and have their lives changed the way that each of us did.
One more quick comment. I was also thinking of the students that come here that are used to going to football games on Friday night, Saturday at their high schools. It gave them a unity and a self-identity that we are losing because we don't have a football team here anymore. I think that would do a lot more for the cohesiveness.
I can see that.
I'm Pete Donaher, class of '92 engineer. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and but as a not to be a contrarian, but as a soccer player back in the early '90s, late '80s, football was held on a higher standard as far as the budget goes, and part of me is concerned that the great strides the school's made with women's sports and the success of for example, the female soccer team. How do you manage bringing back something like this and ensuring the equity through Title IX and all the other sports, that football doesn't take over like they were back in the 90s? All of this is extracurricular. We're here to make great mariners, great naval officers. Can you comment on, I mean, that should be the focus of the school. These other things are great to bring these groups together and find a common cause to move forward. But as far as ensuring those extracurricular activities stay in balance, how do we make sure that happens? Because it wasn't in balance back in the early 90s.
You mind if I take that? I appreciate you bringing that up. I mentioned that I had played football in college. The other sport that I didn't mention was wrestling. So where I had the opportunity to play football in front of 10,000 people, I wrestled in front of 10. When I put that singlet on, it wasn't a good look, but when I put that singlet on with the green terror on the front of it, it was meaningful to me every bit as much as putting a football uniform on was. And that experience has always colored my approach as an athletic administrator. I know the kind of hard work that athletes put in all of their sports. And for me, having been a part of a number of successful athletic departments, there's no mutual exclusivity between one program being successful and other programs being successful, if you're providing the infrastructure to support all those programs. So inside of the plan that I presented to President Paul includes the internal human infrastructure that we need in order to support all of these programs. The success that's happening in those programs now isn't happening because or not because of football existing. It's happening because we have the right people managing the resources correctly to get those results. It happens because we have coaches who are recruiting the right kids in the right place for the right reasons and are consistent in that messaging. I don't think that football is something that's going to cast such a large shadow over the rest of the department that we can't continue to find success in those other sports. I think it has the opportunity to be the flagship to attract more people to Maine Maritime. Success begets success. If we are out in the world recruiting the right kind of people, the kind of people who are getting good grades in the classroom, competing hard on the field, if we're doing that in every sport, we're always going to be okay. And I have some coaches down there who are fairly well compensated for doing just that and do a really good job at it. I see Coach Dagan in the back nodding. Coach Dagan is kind of proof positive of what I'm talking about. Coach P is in the back, who's going to take over women's lacrosse one day, is jumped in on the recruiting. I've been the interim women's lacrosse coach here for almost 3 years now. It was a pandemic freeze kind of deal. I love those kids. I would never give them less than what they deserve. We make sure that across the board, and it's written in our mission, between myself and Coach Carver, our senior woman administrator, who actually wrote that mission, which you can find on the website. Sport equity is actually one of the top priorities of this department. I assure you on my watch, bringing back a football program is not going to hurt other programs here. The budget is separate for each of these sports.
And to add on to that, let me just back up a little bit and say that this discussion about bringing back football has some similarities to other discussions that we've been having for 120 days about expanding athletics writ large. I am a firm believer in the value of athletics and athletic competition in being a crucible, a laboratory for leadership. We're all familiar with the role that the regiment plays in being a leadership laboratory. So too is athletics. You know, I formerly served on the board of trustees for the Naval Academy Foundation, and it's actually the Athletic and Scholarship Fund Foundation. And our primary goal was to support athletics throughout the Naval Academy. And we didn't do that just to be able to run up and down the field and say, hoorah, beat Army. It's that institutions of leadership have long recognized that athletics is a very effective tool and environment for students, young people, to learn leadership skills. Football is no exception. It's a wonderful hierarchical structure with a lot of features and factors where it can be a laboratory for leadership. But it's not the only one. We're having discussions about expanding the wrestling program, taking it from a club sport to a full divisional sport, having some discussions about creating a full-up women's wrestling programs, the fastest growing sport in the NCAA, and when you look at the analysis of it demographically and statistically, it looks like a pretty good fit for Maine. We'd be one of the only, if not the only, in in New England. We have a very accomplished young lady on our wrestling team, perhaps the most decorated wrestler of our team is a woman. And we could build a whole program for women's wrestling. We've looked at some of the other sports, expanding sailing as well. We've got about 34 sailors right now. I haven't said this publicly prior to now, but on the waterfront, I have challenged all of us to think of ourselves as evolving our sailing program to the point where MMA is a top 5 collegiate sailing program in the entire United States. Ultimately going to a sailing program of students, perhaps as many as 100, a tripling of it over time. So this concept of making athletics more available and more diverse as an offering is not something limited to football alone. And I should just add to that, as the coach was saying, I don't think we should pit one sport against the other. We have a quality and caliber of professionals in our athletics department that is fully capable of managing all of them together and maintaining a culture, an environment that is fair and equitable to each and every one of them.
Hi, Dwayne Kippel, class of '92, DEC. My question, I guess almost a statement, is that the Navy transferred me to Washington State, and we're currently seeing in the ferry system a loss of mariners and people to work the boats. And if this is an opportunity to possibly increase enrollment here to make more mariners possibly, because usually mariners come out of football players, has been my experience, in addition to Pete's soccer players. Hi, Pete. But if it's an opportunity to get more enrollment in addition to the fiscal attainment, I think we should look toward doing that, because across the Navy, I sailed on my license, and right now, like I said, looking in my state, there is a deficit of mariners, not just United States mariners, but across the world. And this institution is very good at making mariners, deck and engine. And I think an opportunity to increase enrollment and maybe churn out more to start adding that world's, decreasing that deficit, should be looked at. Thank you.
It's a fine point. I'm glad you raised it. It is a factor as I see it. I think Coach Pete mentioned a moment ago that there's more and more discussion about increasing the regiment. I would frame that slightly different. With the great resignation across the private marketplace, people in the upper echelons of leadership, people with a little more gray in their hair, have retired sooner than most managers had expected. That's hit particularly hard within the maritime industry. People with terminal licenses, chiefs and masters, have retired at a much greater rate. At the same time, the throughput of shipping product has increased. The projected demand for licensed mariners has never been higher in my lifetime, and I think it's only going to continue to rise for a while. Moreover, what has been healthy for Maine Maritime is diversifying its curriculum programs. When many of us were here, there were 2 majors, engine and deck. Now, we had expanded a couple of those a little bit. We'd already moved into the engineering technology, and even moving towards the full ABET accredited MSc type program by then. But the expansion into the ocean studies, oceanography, biology, made us more diverse and was responsible for a lot of the enrollment that helped continue to prop up the college, as the demand for mariners had been lagging for a while. We need to do both. I think last year in our class we turned out about 92 unlimited licensed mariners. I think Mass Maritime turned out about 155. I think SUNY turned out north of 200. We do need to take a look at increasing our throughput of licensed mariners. We can do that while also maintaining the opportunity for those students who do not necessarily want to go to sea. We can do both. But as to the need to increase the number of mariners that we're turning out, I think there are some sports programs that are tailored toward that more than others, and so we need to do that in a balanced and diverse way. I do think that football and probably wrestling can both contribute to that part of a strategy while we're working on the other parts of the strategies as well.
Air class of 99, several comments. Thank you for doing this. I've had so many classmates and non-classmates with emails, upset phone calls about this topic. This presentation, is it going to be available that we can send to classmates later? Thank you. We've heard the ask of 750,000. We understand that. What is the ask, or what's needed to cover the shortfall?
That is the shortfall.
No, for the,
I have no funds in FY23 budget for
so
football.
750, you mentioned that the Academy's facing their largest shortfall ever. So that's the number?
You asked me what is our deficit?
Yes.
Our deficit is pushing $4 million right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Dave Dodge, class of 1971. Wow. What's the recruiting technique for a high school football player? How do we go to them and say, well, we may have football in 2 or 3 years? Why don't you come up and hang around until you're a senior, and then maybe you can play? And on the same hand, has there been any thought to using people like us sitting in the audience as recruiters as our local high schools around the country?
I'm going to defer to Kim Riley for a moment, who is much more of an expert on the nexus between the expectation of a high school student for playing a sport and the actual availability of that sport at the time, and what her professional opinion is on the extent to which an announcement that we are going to play football would affect those expectations and enrollment.
Yeah, thank you, President Paul. So I think that's a great question. As Coach Pede showed in some of the data that we've pulled, you look at the students who have expressed interest. So as part of a student application on the Common App, students are putting information on there about what sports they would have interest in, different things that they have an interest in participating in at the institution if those items are available, those things are available for them. So we know that we have students that have that interest, and we know that the number of students who have deposited showing that interest have gone down over time, which leads us to believe that there is the potential for those students to come back in a recruitment cycle. So as Coach P can probably speak a little more to the actual recruitment of the students, but for those students to be told that this program is coming back and kind of getting that word out there, that's part of the recruiters that go out into the field along with Coach P and the individuals that go out and speak with students. And certainly we would welcome the help of alumni. We'll talk a little bit about Blue Gold. You'll hear about the Blue Gold program and some of those things as we go through the weekend. We're going to have a booth set up tomorrow, myself and Mark Gauss talking to alumni in ways that they can help not only with recruiting of students in some of these potential programs, but also with overall students for the Academy. So there's definitely potential to put that information out there. I think there'll be response from students because we've seen that coming in now on the application process.
We, one of the things that our experts have told me a little bit about is out-of-state recruiting as well. I've made it clear during all of my discussions in Augusta that, quite frankly, my primary responsibility is to make Maine Maritime Academy available to each and every Maine student first. And so I would want to go as broad and deep as I can within this state. Maine Maritime I see as the state of Maine's leadership college, and it's the Maine taxpayers that fund it, granted at a lower rate than other states, but we're working on that as well. Just to pick up on one thing that Coach Pete said, if you compared us against other state maritime academies, particularly the top three of our competitors, SUNY, Mass, Texas A&M. On average, their states are contributing toward their operational budget at a rate of anywhere from 40 to 55%. Quick little vignette: when I first came to Maine Maritime, my first night here on the job, I was rummaging around the file cabinets, and I found a memo from President Ken Curtis, my president when I was here, and this is a man who was a former governor and understood the state of Maine's budget pretty well, but he was almost incredulous during his first speech to the Maine legislature, where he said, "How can you expect me to balance my budget when you're only providing 47% of my capital expenses and 58% of my operational expenses?" Today, that's 22%. If you compare that to the other colleges in Maine that have plus or minus 50% enrollment closest to us, their average is 47.5%. Again, ours is 22%. So we're not receiving as much state funding, but there's a growing body of policymakers who I think are going to true that up and help us update that over time. Having said that, however, I can't solely balance this budget on Maine students. Quite frankly, I can't get the full diversity as well, fully with Maine students. But there are other states that would probably contribute to the football roster. They've explained to me that Florida, for example, is a state of 20 million people that doesn't have a single Division II school. There's an awful lot of football players there who maybe aren't at the Division I football level, and they have no place to play football in that entire state. So Coach Pete has explained to me that that's a fairly target-rich environment for some players to be recruited. Moreover, adding some out-of-state students helps your budget even further because the tuition is higher. I could defer to the coach to talk a little bit more about that. I'm largely repeating things that have been said to me now.
Yeah, I think places we'd want to look include Florida, Texas, where there are a lot of Division III opportunities for those athletes. I think there was a little bit more nuance in your question. I think you were asking about how we would recruit a student with a maybe football program. I would not recruit a student with a maybe football program. I would recruit a student when I have a coach in place of a program. And that's where that ticking clock on the last slide becomes important. It's 189 roughly for the first 6 months of getting the program going in terms of staffing it up and getting out in the world recruiting. Second year is a little closer to 460. So that's what the 750 is, basically those first 3 years. The 75% is what we would basically need to go out in the world and attract a coach, get a quality coach here, and get them to understand we are in this. This is a real thing that we're doing. This is not a maybe thing. I don't even know that it's ethical to go out in the world and tell a young man that we might play football, particularly at a time when there are other opportunities that are available to him to get a license, to get a business degree, and play football.
Thank you. Everybody hear me? My name's Len Tyler, and I've either probably coached you, admitted you, give you financial aid, ask you for money, whatever. So, and I started here in 1969 as an assistant football coach. And then through, I always said our record wasn't the best, and so they move you into administration to get you out of the coaching part of it. But just the value, talking about the value of athletic recruiting, I think you really only need to look at the rosters of the women's basketball program and the women's volleyball program here to see the value of athletic recruiting. I just looked at both of those, and you're going to see the students from Nebraska, from Texas, from Kentucky, from Illinois, from Maine, from New Hampshire, from Massachusetts, and I know in the past from even over from where I'm living now, over from Hawaii. So kids, when they're in high school, you know, when I was a high school student, I chose a college, Ithaca College, because of football. You know, if I wouldn't have even looked, it was a stupid decision, you know, to choose a school based on an athletic sport, but that's the reality of today. And I've always said when I was admissions director here, I always felt that probably 40 students a year came in to Maine Maritime Academy because of the football program. A lot of them didn't stay playing. I mean, probably these guys, they may be the 3 or 4 guys that were in the senior class in 1971. But they're still here. A lot of them were still here, and they were still bringing in the tuition money. And so I think when you look at your 40 or 50 players on the team, I think you'll find that there's still at the academy probably another 20 or 30 or 40 students that wouldn't have been here if it had not been for football. I think there's 3 issues that we're looking at. One is finances, and getting the program started. They need to come up with some money. I think we need to look at the budget, the football budget. Again, this is ancient history, but when I started here, there was a head football coach, Bill Matola. There was myself as basketball coach and assistant football coach, plus I taught physical education 9 hours a week. There was Ed Biggie. Ed was the assistant football coach, and he was the wrestling coach, and when we got the swimming pool, he was the aquatics director. And I don't know if that's the case today. I mean, I think if your budget looks like a full-time head coach, I guess 2 assistant coaches that do not have any other responsibilities. Is that correct?
No,
I mean, when I also worked at a Division III school as a coach at Ithaca College, and a very good program, and I was the defensive coordinator. I was the indoor and outdoor track coach, and I taught GIPE, what they call general education, for general students, physical education. So I think we need to look at raising money to get the program back, and look at recruiting students to get the income coming from tuition. But we also need to look at the cost of the program, and maybe there's a way of starting off the program with a little bit, again, combining some responsibilities so that people are not just football coaches, but they're doing something else. When I was here later on, we'd have Ted Kropp. He was the assistant commandant. He coached football. We had another guy that was a company officer. He coached football. So I just think there's a way of not only raising more money and bringing in more students, but maybe trying to, in the beginning, start off with maybe a little bit more austere program.
Are you telling us you're available?
President Tyler, I appreciate that. A couple of things, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start with the notion that there are coaches doing only one thing. Right now, every single person that works in our department wears multiple hats. Coach Dagan, women's basketball, fundraising. Coach Carver, women's volleyball, associate athletic director, compliance coordinator, senior woman administrator. Steve P., director of athletics, women's lacrosse coach, facilities coordinator, intramurals coordinator, phys ed teacher, not a great one, but a phys ed teacher. So everybody is wearing multiple hats. The only exception to that was the head football coach. Part of what we've done in terms of restructuring the staff in this plan that I presented to President Paul was to, one, make sure that the head coach did have additional duties inside the department, because that was a little bit of a source of consternation, I think, for other people in the staff. The other assistant coaches that were here in a full-time capacity in the past had other duties inside the department. Some of them were intramurals people, so I didn't have to be. Some of them were strength and conditioning coaches. The reality is the NCAA is a regulatory environment, and they continue in the way that bureaucracies do to expand things that are requirements inside your department. And so we have to serve those needs because we have to. We have to serve some of those needs because it's the right thing to do. And so the way that we've built this thing out is essentially a great team approach inside of the department, where at any given moment when somebody's busy, somebody else has to come across and get their back. And so we kind of morphed the football staffing model to fit that a little bit more in the way that we have with other programs. So I appreciate the comments, and I don't disagree with you. You're absolutely correct. One of the services that we don't offer right now is strength and conditioning. We have a certified coach in our athletic training room who is taking that on. But that's a position that I would want one of our coordinators to take on for the department so that we have somebody to provide that strength and conditioning stuff for all of our sports, soccer, volleyball, you name it, that across the board we're taking care of the athletes and supporting them correctly. We are competing for students in the world. We're competing for students in the world. And they go down a staff directory. I'm hoping they don't look closely at ours because they'll notice that all the names at the top as administrators are also coaches. And in the NUMAC, where we were competing, that wasn't the case. It's not uncommon at this day and age for Division III to have 2 to 3 associate athletic directors who do one thing. They do compliance, or they do facilities, or they do recreation. Here, we all share that burden. We are probably, I say this all the time, we can't be successful in our organization without synergies. And so we have to be the most synergistic staff in the world to offer all of the things that we need to compete against other Division III schools who are out looking for the same athletes that we're looking for. And oh, by the way, that number is getting smaller every year. So this is the austere version. If we go more austere than this, I don't think I can get a kid to come here and be a part of what it is that we're trying to do. I need to be able to tell them that you're going to have access to that varsity weight room and there's going to be a strength and conditioning coach that knows what they're doing. They need to know that there's enough athletic trainers down there to make sure that if there is a concussion, that if there is a groin pull, that they're going to be able to get treatment reasonably quickly and get back out on the field. And so I don't want to, we talked about sport equity, I don't want to short the football program just to get it back. My last 3 years in college, we went 30-0. My last 3 years, I think we went 0-30 here. There was a homecoming game where I couldn't even watch the second half. I couldn't watch it. I went in my office and I waited for people to come in and tell me everything that was wrong with the football program. I don't want to jump back into that fire. I want to do this well. I want to have a program that all of you as alumni can be proud of, that all of the kids who are in it can be proud of. And I'm not sure that doing it on an austere fashion is going to get us there.
Well, I think it's recruiting is the secret to it. When I coached football, I went to many conferences, and I remember Baron Bryant being asked why Alabama was so good. And he always said, well, you never saw an old nag win the Kentucky Derby. And that's what this is all about. We need, the biggest thing we've got is we've got to get out recruiting. It needs the help of everybody in this room. But it's possible to do it. I have a nephew that started here just a few weeks ago. He's from upstate New York, and he's paying, I can't believe what he's paying. He's paying $58,000 to go here. He's a very good lacrosse player, he's a quarterback in football. Actually, when we were talking, I said, geez, you ought to look at New York Maritime Academy because it's about $20,000 a year cheaper. So, somehow we have to, if we want to bring kids in from out of state, we've got to address the issue of the differential of what it costs. He's here, he's paid it, he paid his first semester by his father cashing in his IRA, and his father is terminally ill with cancer, but they're willing to do this thing to get this kid here. So, and I was just surprised when he told me, I said, Trey, what are you going to do next year? He said, I want to go to Maine Maritime Academy. I said, Jesus, what? I've heard you talk about it every time you've been down here for like 10 years. So, and that's when I said, well, look at Maine. I mean, look at Mass. Look at New York. New York primarily because of the cost, but he's here, and I just had lunch with him, and he didn't try to kill me. So I guess he enjoys it here, and he's, but it's going to be costly. So somehow to recruit, to get the people in here, we're going to have to find a way. I mean, we're a Division III school, and I realize you can't give athletic scholarships, but there has to be a way of somehow letting kids from out of state pay a reasonable amount. I was president, so I know it got out of hand when I was president because of the same issues that Jerry's facing, the same issues that Bill Brennan faced, is the lack of state support, and the cost of tuition has to go up to fill the gap between. I think when I took over it was maybe 38%, and then I think when Ken Curtis took over it was maybe 50% or 51% from the state, and it's been going down and down and down ever since. And hopefully that can change, but it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon.
Hi, my name is Peter Longley, also class of 71. Perhaps I missed something in the first half hour. I got in late. But I noticed in the last 10, 15 years there's been 2 new Division III football teams in the state of Maine, okay? Husson, which used to have a good program, they're having a tough year this year. But College of New England down in Biddeford, beautiful facilities, and they're doing fantastic. And so we have to compete against those type of people. How was College of New England able to get up and run with a great program?
Am I back one? Yeah, okay. We were talking about the University of New England earlier today. Kim Riley is in the doctorate program there, a little bit on hold. I am as well. We're funding UNE. Right now, their entire existence is off of their online programs. So they're raking in cash and they're turning it around to fund their undergraduate. They've dedicated resources to the program. That's really what it comes down to. They went out and got a high quality coach. They staffed up the program correctly. They're supporting it correctly. And they've made a pretty strong declaration that they intend to be good at football, and they're following through. It's resources.
Good afternoon. My name is Cole Edens. I'm a senior here at Maine Maritime. I don't really have a question, but I have more of a statement. I played on the last football team here, fall of 2019. And I understand the challenges that we're facing as an academy and in the department, but I think it's a very important thing to get back the football program because the sheer numbers, like I knew so many successful engineers and deck officers and other majors that I can still text today that they texted me, hey, when you graduate, you want to come work for this company. So that's certain things that you can't get. Like in other sports, you can get that and you meet. I have a lot of friends that don't play sports here, but I think that was a very important part of me playing football here. And football was one of the things that got me here. I transferred. I went to a different college before I came here, and I was looking at Texas A&M. I was looking at Great Lakes, and I knew about Maine Maritime and the football program, and I grew up in Arkansas, and I love playing football. It's big down south. Like, I'm an Arkansas Razorbacks fan. Like, the SEC is the best conference. So when I came up here, football, it's not the only reason why I came up here because obviously the football program's gone. I stayed up here, and but it's definitely a good thing to have. Like I can tell you as a mug, like going through all the regimental stuff, I got to go to SUNY Maritime, play my first game there on my birthday. You get to go and tackle people. Like as a mug, you have all of that energy and like frustration balled up, and I got to go and just absolutely crush guys from MIT. So it's stuff like that it's a good experience to have. And also there's a certain group of people that play football. Like there's a lot of great athletes, like soccer players, like they run an insane amount. Like I'm not a fan of that, but football, like the physicality and just the athletics, I think it's important to get those people here because you need to be physically fit to work out in the industry. And I'm also the regimental physical training instructor. And ever since COVID, we haven't had any like fitness regulations or any PT here at all. And this past Monday, we did our first fitness test since 2019. So I hope that keeps improving. But I think with bringing the football program back, hopefully that will improve it as well. Thank you.
Mr. Edens, I appreciate your comment. One of the most disappointing things you're going to find in life beyond college athletics is that they don't let you tackle people out in the world. It's a hard-learned lesson if you try it. But I appreciate your comments, I really do, and I'm sorry that the experience you had here hasn't been what it was that you were looking for.
Hi, afternoon. Is it right? My name is John Webb, 83E. I'm also in the newest group of Board of Trustees here at the Academy. I was in that wrestling room in, 1980 when Coach Matola and Coach Biggie came in and said, congratulations, your wrestling career is over. Not that I really had a great one, but at least I had one. And we're going to now have something called basketball. And so that was the last time that we had varsity wrestling at Maine Maritime Academy. And it was heartbreaking, but I think intellectually, even though emotionally you were crushed, intellectually you knew that for the academy, varsity basketball was much more important for all the reasons that have been stated here today than wrestling was. With respect to UNE, when they said they were going to start playing football, I was interested in that only because I was hearkening back to the loss of wrestling and how much that hurt, and then wondered how the heck is UNE going to have football. My son's a senior, and he plays football right now at the University of Maine, and he was recruited by UNE. And one of the things I learned when he was being recruited by UNE was that they had alumni that wanted football. And that was the difference. They had an administration, they had a president, and that president found she was heck bent on having football, and she found the alumni support to make that happen. And I think that's the message that we've got here today clearly, but I hope we can all rally around and make that happen as well. Thank you.
Jen DeMarchi Audette, class of 92E. Couple of things. I've been hearing a lot of what's going, around the room. So a couple of things have come to mind. In roughly 1989, 1990, we didn't really have a football recruiting program problem. We had a problem where we had more football players and that weren't interested in the regiment, hence the power engineering, which was great. It helped diversify the curriculum of the school. Now we have a recruitment problem. And Steve, thank you as the first female head coach of wrestling in the state of Connecticut. I love to hear the fact that wrestling is coming back to the academy. However, also as someone who has done some recruiting at college fairs in the state of Connecticut, I can tell you that a lot of students don't want to come talk to me. They don't want to hear about Maine Maritime and going out to sea. And I hear Mr. Kipple, and I think it's great that there is this deficit that may come at some point. But if you're looking at football, which we know is an expense, and I know that wrestling is an expense, maybe one of the things we need to look at, and I don't want to lose our focus as someone who was in the regiment and someone who went through engineering, but maybe the focus needs to be a little bit on diversifying the curriculum and what we offer. I heard from a gentleman over there that one of the things was, virtual. I hate to go that route. I want to stay true to our roots, but if we need recruitment and we need money, then maybe the focus is broadening the curriculum. Thank you.
No response on that one?
Yeah, we're actually looking at both. We're looking at all of the above, all of those options. Each and every one of them can contribute, can play a role, including some fairly innovative and aggressive strategies to seek resources, funding from additional tracks. We're doing all of those. This is just one piece of it. Each sport has some of its unique features, both intangibles and tangibles. Trying to look at both sides of that, my focus has largely been on the fiscal aspect of it, but there are a lot of intangible aspects of each and every different sport. The fact that there's this many people attending something called a football summit, a term made up relatively recently, as an indication that there are a fair number of people who recognize the intangible aspects of it as well. That's somewhat persuasive to me, even though I've focused primarily on the fiscal part of it. There are other sports you could look at, and we are looking at them. I don't know that there would be as many people attend a summit for some of those other sports. Doesn't mean we can't do those as well. As far as diversifying the programs, we very much are looking at that, and I don't want to turn this meeting into that, but we should talk more and more about some of the ideas that we're considering with corporate partners as well. Because of everything that's happening in the maritime industry, there are many more opportunities for MMA to leverage its brand. There's so many current trends from decarbonization, electrification, automation, offshore wind. All of those are pressing us towards considering options for expanding the curriculum offerings. We're doing those things too. And I don't rule out some online, some virtual opportunities, particularly with our IBL programs. The expectation of the marketplace now is online. That was trending even before COVID. It's trending even more so now. We don't have the ability to convert our programs to virtual offerings in the same way as others because we are hands-on and we pride ourselves in that hands-on component, and that hands-on component is a big part of what makes the MMA experience and the MMA output, the product, different, and part of why the employers stand in line to hire our students rather than the other way around. But that doesn't mean that we can be tone deaf to the trends that are happening out there, such as the virtual, and we're looking very, very deeply at those. And there are some opportunities where we can do that as well.
Yeah, just a couple of comments, and then maybe one, maybe pedantic question about your budgeting timeline there. I firmly believe, I think back of the envelope math, I would say there are somewhere around 1,000 graduates of this school that played football since its inception. Maybe 800 of those are still with us. And if you project the success rate of those 800 football players to the median or mean of the success rate of all of us in our various chosen paths of life and in and outside of the industry, I believe that the solving for the funding is going to be an achievable task, provided that we get very organized and very aggressive and looking for individual and corporate and other donations. What I think is the most important thing, and Steve touched on it, is the recruiting aspect. And that's a several-legged tool, and one of that is going to be find a great coach and somebody that integrates with the team that you've built, which is fantastic. I've watched you build all of that over the years in the existing athletic programs. If you can get a staff that integrates and brings that same passion, that same drive to success, to reinstating or reinvigorating a football program here, I think you pair that with the story of the school, football plus, look at the metrics over, pick a number of years looking backwards or projecting forward. The success rate, it doesn't matter what program track you're in here, the overall professional placement rate and success rate of students coming from this school is astronomical. So I think there's a huge opportunity to do it right this time, both in terms of managing that program, integrating it into the academy community, but also really telling the story of this institution, both its history and its future, and driving that point home to kids all over the country. And we're talking 20 students a year who come here because of that story, and to play football is all it takes once we get through the ramp-up phase to make a sustainable program here. And I for one, think that can't possibly be an insurmountable challenge. So the right people, the right motivation, and I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't have, wouldn't be here and wouldn't be in our industry if you weren't motivated towards excellence. So that's my soapbox. My question about the budget, when you were looking at the flat rate of funding versus the 7.5% year-on-year growth for the football program, that seems astronomically high to me. What drives a 7% year-on-year consistent growth in an athletic program, individual athletic program? Do you have that breakout?
I don't have the breakdown, but I can tell you what the biggest driver behind it is. The football program was in the neighborhood of 550,000 in the last year it was online. A little known fact about our coaching positions here is that they're collectively bargained. And so there are certain wage grades that get assigned to it. So inside of that collective bargaining agreement, there are step increases for longevity. There are built-in cost of living adjustments. And then there's the skyrocketing costs of insurance inside of each position. And so you take a coach who's been here over a long period of time, and you build all those step increases in, and then you build in those insurance costs over time. That number just continues to go up. So we're not like other schools where a coach comes in on a 3 or 5 year contract. It's X amount of dollars, and then at the end of that contract, we either move on or renegotiate or restructure that deal. So there's built-in just escalation throughout, and as each position gets added, that number gets a little bit exponentially bigger. So one of the things in configuring the staff was to actually reduce it by one full-time position and try to make that 7.5% come down a little bit lower, was to drive a football coach wage grade down just a little bit so that we can still attract a quality coach but not have that sort of explosive growth over time if the person were to stay for 20 years.
Yeah, but it seems to me like, just from an administrative standpoint, managing that year-on-year budget is going to be a key to the ongoing success of this program once it's back up and running.
Without a doubt. And I'm looking at Craig because I've asked him to add another golf tournament about 7 times this year. I know there's no capacity for him to do that, but I keep asking. With inflation being what it is, with gas prices being what it is, our costs of buses this year alone have gone up 25% this fall from one year to the next. That money's got to come from somewhere. And so there's a lot of things that we're facing right now that make things difficult. But the alumni support that we've been getting over the years has been keeping us afloat. So we're making the budget year after year, but at some point that becomes unsustainable at 7.5%.
Thank you.
I want to just thank all of you for being here. I think this is really important and a really good discussion. My name is Paul Mercer. I've been involved with the football program, and one of the problems I have right now today is that I miscalculated this meeting today. I thought it was tomorrow, and I have a family commitment that I have to go to. But the reason I forgot that is because President Tyler wouldn't give us helmets when we played, and he made us play. So I probably have some head damage up here. But at the same time, I think this is a really good group, a really good discussion. I think that we can accomplish this, and it's just a matter of going out and doing it. And it is important to the school. It is important to the programs, and it's really a benefit to the academy as a whole. And again, I'm 100% behind it. I will be 100% behind it all the way. I support all the things that have been said by the administrators and the president, and we will get this done. And it's just a matter of let's go do it. So again, I apologize for the head problems. It's over there that caused it. So thanks a lot.
Good evening, Chris Mercer, 88E, President and Coach. Thanks for putting this on, everybody that helped do it. Certainly learning a lot. It's great to be back on campus. It is not great. I'm not going to see a football game tomorrow. So you know where my position is. I thought it was a no-brainer. No firm position on this. I thought it was just suspended because of COVID, right? no-brainer. Of course we're going to have football come back at some point. We've got a plan, but the plan required, if we want to do that plan, you know, in 2025, we got to start ramping up. So my question is, who makes that decision? Is that you makes? Is that your decision to make that says that, well, I got this deficit of $4 million and I need $135,000 by June, or, you know, this incremental, you know, a couple $100K here or there. We got to get going. So what is it going to take? First of all, I guess, is it your decision on whether we're going to, or is there a board, or?
So let me start with that.
I have a follow-on question. I just didn't know whose decision it was
Sure.
to make the decision to bring it back.
Yep. So first of all, as I started this term as president, I inherited a budget. So I didn't go through the budget process. There's an annual budget process where it's not unlike, not totally unlike every other budget process you've seen, but that had just concluded at the time I came in. So I have to manage to the budget that I have for a year. And that budget does not have any funds in it for football. That's what I was saying. Then, as to your question, who makes the decision? Well, you know, higher ed has some features that are fundamentally different than the private sector. The CEO does not ultimately get to simply say, here's what we're going to do. He does have a lot of influence over that process, including the budget process. But there is a internal process where all of the organizations, starting back this year, will make an annual report, and we'll go through a corporate programming and make budget decisions in this coming year in a new budget process where indeed I will
for 24.
That's correct, where I will indeed play a major role, but it has to be a collaborative process. In higher ed, there has to be shared governance. But
I'm just going back to your statement
Yep.
that said you don't have a strong position. I think it's a no-brainer. Like,
Right.
we have to, I'm like, okay, of course we're going to have football. Like, let's get going.
Right.
How do we get that back in
so
the
if you're
budget?
asking me why it's not a no-brainer,
No, I just, what do you need to see in order for you to have a strong position, like most of us in this room, except for soccer play. But of course we're going to have football again.
Yep.
Like, it's clear to me.
It's not clear to me that at the timeline that includes spending money to hire a coach in December that I do not have, that it would be wise to drive our deficit deeper to spend that money that we don't have.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
just one
constraint.
plan, right? That's just one plan in
That's correct.
2025. I mean, I guess just
Sure.
the idea that the position of this indefinite suspension, you know, are we going to have football again? I think, you know, what is it going to take for you to have a strong position that says we're going to have football? What do you have to see?
I think the fiscally responsible thing to see is that we raise enough external funds to convince ourselves that while these enrollment numbers mature, that we have the funding in place to make those hires. It's a chicken and the egg. Quite frankly, I'm in a chicken and egg position. I'll just be honest with you. And so I'm not asking that this be done. I'm saying, though, that it looks to me as though we need to be able to raise funds from some external sources. If people want to do that, I'm all in. But I cannot simply bet on the come and assume that that enrollment is going to pay for it in the future, because I don't have the money in the budget to do that.
Yeah, I understand.
That's the simple truth.
There's
Now-
you're going to have to bet on some calm at some point, right? Because
Sure.
you can't just turn it on and off like a light switch.
That's
you're going
right.
to have to grow it over a number of years, and you know, so at
Could
some
you
point-
could you defer it into the future until we have worked down that deficit through a whole host of other strategies that I'm working on every day? Yes, you could defer it further into the future. What Coach Pete is saying is, here is a scenario that gets you there quicker, but it requires a spend sooner than we have the funds. And so as to that scenario, those funds would have to come somewhere. Are there people who would rally around that and organize and conduct a campaign to raise those funds? I don't know. If there was a group that emerged that raised those funds, I believe we would go forward and do this.
Yeah, I just think it should be, part of the capital campaign. Your note is, there is no football program in any of the capital campaign, right? Like, well, wait a minute. All the other programs are in there, right? So it just seems to me that
Well, no,
we
none of
gotta
the
get
other
past-
programs are in there.
No, I mean, like, other efforts that we have to fund.
Well, those are capital expenditures, buildings mostly, facilities, not a program. I'm not arguing against it. I'm trying to answer your question of
I just think
why,
we gotta-
what is the tight spot that we're in? That's what I'm trying to explain.
I appreciate the tight spot. It's tighter than what I understood, but I appreciate you letting us know. I just think it's got to be, we got to get out of this indefinite suspension thing, and we got to make a decision. And let's go, and let's get it in the program, and let's get the money going.
I think that's well stated. I think that is the basis upon which we said, let's use this moment, this homecoming, to actually have a venue, a forum, a summit, if you will, so that we can have this discussion, so that everybody has the same information. That's, quite frankly, why I created this summit.
One other thing that I want to say to y'all, and he hasn't said this, and I'm going to say it, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn. Not only did he inherit a budget, he inherited a decision that the former president made too.
Well, look, Jerry, let me just say this. Since the real purpose of this summit is to create a team to really get this thing moving, because an aggressive timeline is the best way to actually get this to a self-sustaining enterprise as quickly as possible. So I absolutely will lend all necessary time and effort and some of my own capital to assist in this process. So
Thank you, sir.
I volunteer wholeheartedly, and will
Thank
do
you.
whatever I need to.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President?
Thank you. And I just realized I wasn't hearing it very well because I left my hearing aids up in the room. So I can hear if I speak loud. I can hear you. It seems like, when I first came back here this summer, Jerry was the first guy to talk to me about football. So I know he realizes the importance of it in the sense of enrollment and the sense of the budget. So it seems like we're at a point now where we need to raise some money to get it off the ground again. I'm not sure, Steve, as I said, I didn't hear everything. Did you say a $750,000? Is that what the cost? But that wouldn't be your first year cost, right? Your first year cost, you're going to hire a coach in February. You need to if we're going to bring it back, we need to do something right away. I mean, the kids are in high school playing football now, and this is when you're out there looking at them and talking to them and creating some interest in coming to Maine Maritime Academy. It seems like we need to right now put together some sort of a fundraising committee to look at football, funding that first year anyways, and hopefully further on. But if it's true that we're going to recruit an additional 25 to 40 students that wouldn't be here otherwise, by the second year, maybe there's not as much money would have to be raised. I think $750,000 probably is doable. It'd be a stretch, but I think the only way we're going to do it, the only way we think that get this thing started again is to get a group together to figure out how best to do it and to raise money in order to do it.
President Tyler, thank you. 750,000 was the number total. The number that we're looking for by 12.
That was for a 3-year.
For 3 years, correct.
3-year ramp up to a fully developed 80-man roster, if you will. With,
Correct.
with that that incremental year-on-year added enrollment after 3 years becoming self-fulfilling
Right.
from a funding perspective.
That's correct. And the ask was for 75% of that by 12/31,
So
which is
to me,
562.
I think the chicken and the egg really isn't first year, second year, third year dollars. To me, the real challenge is how do you get far enough along in that fundraising plan to be confident enough to hire the coach and not announce you hired a coach and have the fundraising plan die because everybody thinks mission accomplished, right?
That's, Ed, I think you've put your,
That's absolutely
you've put your finger right on the issue is,
I
getting,
believe that
getting to that point where you have the confidence level that you're not going to have to suspend it again. Well, getting the institution to the point where it would have the confidence level that this would be sustainable, and it's not going to have to stop the daggone thing again because you don't have the money.
I think our fundraising effort has to be 110 miles an hour
Mhm.
right now, with the goal of raising the entire, or at least getting pledges for the entire amount, and maybe setting milestones for those pledges to materialize. But we need, I believe we need to be focused on getting there tomorrow.
Steve, can you repeat
And
that
not
number that
thinking
you
this is
said
a
by
3-year
December
fundraising
31st?
Because it really isn't.
Because it really isn't what?
It really isn't a 3-year fundraising plan.
No.
I mean, it's really maybe a 6-month plan, right? Maybe not even that.
Otherwise, you're making a commitment in your budget, because what I would have to do is build into the budget a recurring debt, if you will, or recurring liability on that side of the ledger, and without revenue to offset it, you're driving yourself into a deeper deficit. And you really mentioned it, really put your finger on it. It's the timing to get you to that confidence level, kind of getting the flywheel going quick enough so that you know that you can keep it going.
The question was, what was the number? The number is 562, 500.
I think there's some confusion. The number that he feels by December 31st it needs to be raised in order to get to that comfort level is $562,000.
So Clarence Snyder, 71. I probably played without the helmet as well, Len. So I get the idea of a fundraising activity, and so that we need to go do that. The piece that the numbers earlier, President Paul, as to the state's commitment to the academy, is it a 22% where it was something larger before? So I guess one of the things that you have out here to mobilize is an alumni that would visit with finance chairman and those kinds of folks that sit on finance committees and have them understand the story that's just been told today, I think. So I'm wondering how we might organize that as well, so that we kind of press and put the arm on the finance committee of the state of Maine to understand the importance of this institution. I think the second piece is Susan Collins is in a position where she needs to help out too. And so I'm wondering when your next meeting is with Susan.
Yep. So on a separate track, what you're really talking about is governmental affairs strategy and lobbying to increase appropriations for a higher ed budget, something that I've been doing for about 3 decades in my private life. And I don't want to turn this meeting into that meeting. Offline, we can discuss what we are currently putting in place for the most, I'm going to say this very carefully, the most aggressive legislative affairs campaign that Maine Maritime Academy has ever pursued. That's in the works right now. This is probably not the venue for discussing the hyper-technical details of that. There are a lot of pieces and parts to doing that and doing it successfully, and those pieces and parts are being put in place right now. It's a long process. It's a cycle. Our annual legislative session in Augusta is this spring. There are aspects of it that have already begun, including our form filings for those requests, and we can talk about those offline. And each and every person from House, Senate, committee chairs, Ed Committee, Ed Appropriates Committee, Governor, Governor's staff, senators, legislators, all of those, we could talk offline on all of those things that are being done, but it is a pretty comprehensive campaign. It's just not something that I rolled out in this meeting today. But by the way, I can't go to Augusta and ask for money for a football program. I can go to Augusta and ask to get Maine Maritime Academy in parity with its comparable peer colleges in the state of Maine, so that we can balance our budget and be competitive with our external competitors as well. And we have built a case around the notion that if the state makes that investment, the return on that investment will net out far beyond the state's investment, just like the return on investment for a student is the highest at Maine Maritime of any college in America. We are going to make the case that the return on investment for the state of Maine is the highest with Maine Maritime Academy. So we are working on that. Be glad to talk to you about that later.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if anybody has one. No? I think we're good then. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Before everybody leaves, a couple closing comments, if you don't mind. Picking up on what Paul Mercer said, thank you for everybody who came here. You just look around this room. You know, only at Maine Maritime Academy could you put something on a homecoming agenda called a football summit and have this many people show up, but with this amount of passion, and quite frankly, what I'm hearing is some financial commitment, some thought, some strategy, and I suspect what is going to emerge going forward is an actual plan. I want to be clear that I'm not asking you to do this on your own. I'm all in on this as long as I can get my fellow alumni to help me reduce the risk of us going further into debt that would harm this institution. Everybody here cares about this institution. We're all just trying to get there, and you guys showing up here and gals showing up here and saying, okay, there's a part of this that we can do too. You have no idea how much that means to me. Thank you.